interesting autism research project that we've got going on at Children's Specialized. So let me, I'm advancing my slides. Here we go. So on this, let's talk a little bit about autistic youth. And you know, I'm sure all of you have heard the controversy, should we talk about autistic youth versus youth with autism? So I'll probably alternate for the purposes of this presentation, but in general, it's always the best idea to ask somebody how they prefer to be called, and if they view, you know, have identity first language that they prefer versus person first language. But on the topic of sexual health, there's some myths about autistic youth. And one of them that you sometimes hear is that, well, you know, I don't even have to think about this topic for my son or daughter with autism because they're never going to have sex. They're not interested in sex. I will always be able to protect them. I can't think of my son or daughter beyond being a child. I can't really view them in a sexual role. Some people feel that, believe it or not, that there are myths that people with autism are hypersexual or hyposexual, or possibly just not interested in or in ever having a relationship like that. But it's really important to think about sexual health and address it, because really all people are sexual beings. You know, as Dr. G pointed out, sexuality doesn't start at puberty. You know, it's you know, you're born a sexual being, and by addressing sexual health, it's possible, and it hopefully will facilitate more positive relationships. We can talk about ways of addressing some behaviors that might be perceived as challenging, such as, you know, masturbating in public, staring, stalking. One thing that's really important to mention here is that youth with special needs are at increased risk of sexual abuse and exploitation. And there's been several studies, and here's a very startling statistic, that girls with developmental disabilities, women with developmental disabilities, depending on the study, 65 to 80% of them report having been sexually assaulted at some point in their life. So this is unfortunately more common than anybody would ever want. And it's not just for females with autism who are at risk of increased risk of sexual abuse or exploitation, but also males with autism. So, you know, addressing sexual health, I think, will hopefully help to for us, we parents, caregivers, and autistic youths and adults to have some tools in our toolbox for how to address this. It could also help to promote better hygiene and health, and to foster self-determination and self-esteem. So it's important that the person is prepared as possible to participate in life as independently and as safely as possible. So let's learn more about your body and about sex. So how did you learn about sex? Think back, and where did you learn about sex? Did you learn it probably mostly from other kids, your peers? But recognize that some of our autistic sons and daughters might not have as many opportunities as non-autistic youth in talking and having relationships with peers, or relationships where you might talk about sex. Did you learn it in school health or sex ed classes? Well, unfortunately, statistics show that our sons and daughters who might be in special education might be less exposed to sex education or more personalized, appropriate, accessible sex education than their non-autistic classmates. Did you learn it from your parents? I know I had a conversation with my mother that she sat next to me. We made no eye contact and was very awkward and painful for both of us. But you know, parents might not be having these conversations with their kids if they feel that they don't need to, or that they could provide supervision 24/7. Did you learn about sex from the media? Well, you know, when you watch things on the media, it could be for good, it could be for evil, and it could give some very misleading views about what sex is. If our sons and daughters are watching different shows on TV or on the internet, what have you, they might get the false impression about that everybody's having sex, and that is not the case. So who should provide sex education? You know, we could be parent, guardian, school, it could be therapists, it could be a combination, and it really depends on, you know, comfort level and preparation. So that's why today we want to talk more about it so that you guys will feel more prepared. But let's first look at how sex education is provided in schools. Okay. Again, according to the Centers for Disease Control, less than 50% of all high schools and only 20% of middle schools even have a comprehensive sex education curriculum. And most states don't necessarily mandate sex education at all. Since there's not a whole lot of information about formal sex education for kids with special needs, it's unclear what actually is being provided and if the curriculum have been empirically validated to show that they're understandable and accessible. A lot of times when sex ed is provided for kids with special needs, the emphasis is on like body parts, you know, the anatomy, that an egg is released and could be fertilized and here's pregnancy and so forth. But it's not really talking about relationships, sexual health in terms of relationships. So, hey, I'm talking to you guys, parents and us guys. I am having a lot of grammar problems this afternoon. Us, we, you know what I mean, all of us on this in this meeting and who probably are going to be viewing this recording. So let's talk about how to get ready to have this conversation, and it really should be conversations, multiple and over time, with your kids. And are you an askable parent? Are you an askable parent in general? Are you an askable parent on the topic of sex education? Like I think Dr. G said before, sometimes we might be uncomfortable or afraid to have these conversations. And so it's always important to monitor your own fears. You know, why are you afraid to have this conversation with your child? And sometimes it could be helpful to practice so that, and kind of rehearse the conversation. When we talk about creating the mood or teachable moments or tone, one thing is, here's a tip that I have. Sometimes it can be helpful to have these conversations when you're in a car, when you're driving in a car, and maybe your son or daughter's in the back seat, maybe they're next to you. But by definition, when you're driving, you're probably not going to be turning a whole lot and making eye contact. That could be more comfortable, a more comfortable setting for you to have these conversations, and it could be more comfortable for your son and daughter too. I want to point out that it's important, just like with any other topic or any other aspect of parenting, to consider your values. You want to make sure that you're expressing to your child what your values are, and that this is incorporated in everything that you're talking to your child about. You want to make sure that you're a safe place, that you are a safe place for your child to be able to ask anything, and to show that this is a serious topic, but you're also calm when you talk about it. That's why, like I said, it could be helpful to rehearse. So plan ahead. Okay, when to teach. This is something that is not just one conversation. You want to teach early and to teach often. So what you talk about is going to be different for your preschooler, your elementary school age child, your high school age child, your child, depending on what their cognitive level is and their level of language. But in general, you want to bring up topics before those changes are expected. So I don't know if any of you know Peter Gerhardt, but he is a fabulous presenter, and he's involved with the Organization for Autism Research and other, he's here in New Jersey, other organizations. He has what's called a 5-year rule. And this means generally bring up a topic 5 years before you expect it to happen. So wow. If you're talking about, if you're talking about puberty, generally puberty starts, I think anywhere, it could be 8 to 16. You want to bring it up before your daughter is starting to menstruate, before your son is starting to have erections. So before you see these, anticipate the changes in their body, you want to talk about how bodies change and what to expect. I talked about the value of a car ride and the point about it not being just one talk. So we say we want to repeat it, rinse, and recycle. And we're going to talk some about how to talk about it and how to make things more concrete for our kids with autism. So how do you teach? Just like anything else, and I know, Ashley, you're a former special ed teacher, and just like anything else that you teach, all parents, we always teach on different topics. What do you want to do with, again, with our autistic sons and daughters? Chances are we want to be more concrete. You want to use a lot of repetition, break the information into small blocks. You know how we use visual aids, or you could have like social stories, social narratives. There's ways that you could do that for teaching sexual health topics, and we're going to show several examples of this. So in addition to bringing up the topic, your kids might bring this topic up to you. So let's talk a little bit about how to handle questions when they bring up a question. So the first thing is, if your son or daughter is bringing up a question about their body, about sexuality, sexual health, sex, you want to normalize the question. And you could start off just by saying, that's a really good question. I wonder why you're asking that today. Because this is a way of seeing, did something happen? Did they see something? Before you launch into an answer, this could help give it some kind of context. The second thing is, before you launch into your answer, you might say, well, what do you think the answer is? And what do you think? And this is really good because it helps you to get an idea about what your son or daughter already knows and the sort of language that he or she is using to express what they know. It's also a good opportunity to dispel some myths. If they have some misconception about relationships, what sex is, about how their body works, this is a way that you could see what their understanding is, and you could correct that if it's incorrect. You want to answer honestly based on what your child's responses are and what your values are. And this is, again, an opportunity to introduce your views about, well, this is what, in our family, this is what we think, and this is what we value, while also giving honest and accurate information. You want to then see, did that answer your question? Now, a lot of times somebody might ask a question and we go into this long-winded explanation of all these sorts of things, and they just had this one specific question and they didn't really want to know this whole thing. So it is always good to say, well, did I answer your question? Or just answer a small amount before you launch into a lot of details. And if they didn't understand your answer, then this gives you an opportunity to reword your response and to use different resources. So what are some teaching techniques? And for any topic, really, any topic related to anything, you could use collages, graphic organizers, pictures that you sort. For talking about self-esteem, public and private, what's public and private, and hygiene, it's really helpful to have body charts. We're going to talk about circles of intimacy. I'll show you some pictures of anatomically correct dolls, which they sell, by the way. When teaching about social skills, it could be really helpful to look at videos together, to use rating scales for if something's safe or unsafe. And, I don't know if, when you talk about anxiety, I don't know if you've ever used a thermometer to rate your level of anxiety. You could use this for rating somebody's, what they think might be safe or unsafe behaviors. So let's first talk about puberty. And, puberty happens whether somebody is autistic or whether they're not autistic. Whether you want them to enter puberty or not, it's going to happen, just like anybody who's not autistic. So as I mentioned before, puberty typically occurs between 8.5 to 16 years for girls, a little bit later, 9 to 18 years for boys. For some of our kids, they might have co-occurring medical conditions. And so, for example, thyroid disease, anti-seizure medications can affect the age of menstruation. If somebody also has cerebral palsy and autism, kids with cerebral palsy, girls with cerebral palsy especially, tend to enter puberty at a younger age. During puberty, this can be a time when you start to notice an increase in meltdowns or aggression. For some, not all, because for some of our kids, they might be less likely to meltdown or experience aggression. But again, when you hear the term when hormones kick in. So hormones are kicking in at puberty, and sometimes that could result in behavioral changes and not just physical changes. So do we all know all of the signs of puberty in boys? So puberty is associated with a rapid growth spurt, could be changes in mood, hair growth, increased erections, skin breaking out, being more sweaty, wet dreams, the voice starts to change. As I said, sometimes it could be an increase in aggression. And for girls, puberty is associated with growth in breast growth, again, acne, mood changes, hair growth. You see the body start to change shape, again, increase in sweat and body odor, and then the onset of your period. For girls, maybe not as more so than for boys, you tend to see more concerns about body image. See, there's something in the chat. Let me just see if I'm, oh, okay. I'll try to keep my eye open for that. Okay. Okay. So what do we want to teach in terms of puberty for our daughters? All of these topics that I mentioned before about breast development, hair, acne, so forth. It's really important to talk about menstruation before your daughter starts to menstruate. Now, I don't know the ages of everybody on this call, but, and you want to talk about it as a matter of fact. There's actually lots of books out there about teaching menstruation for girls with developmental disabilities or other special needs. I think there's this book, a classic, Janet Gets Her Period, or Janet and Her Period, or something. That's been around for a long time. But you know what? You don't have to buy a book, because you could make your own book. You can make your own social story about this that talks about the steps of what to do. Also, puberty and becoming an adult is something to be celebrated. You want to create the message that this is all an exciting time. Even if you're scared to have this conversation or scared about your child becoming an adolescent, you want them to feel good about their bodies. And one of the messages, whether it's for girls or for boys, is that bodies come in different sizes, different shapes, different colors, and all bodies are beautiful. All bodies are special. We want to take care of our bodies so that they could be strong and celebrate what our bodies can do. As part of this celebration, you could use this as an opportunity. Let's go to the store and go shopping for personal hygiene products. Like, let's go and choose what kind of deodorant would you want? What kind of shaving equipment and things would you want? What kind of shampoo do you want? What kind of sanitary pads do you want? These kinds of things, so that you want them to feel some sense of ownership and pride. For boys, again, what are key topics to talk about regarding puberty? You want to talk about the changes in their bodies. You want to talk about what erections are, that these can happen very unexpected and not at the time that might be convenient. Prepare them for what to expect about wet dreams. Offer erection management strategies. Again, women, maybe you don't know erection management strategies, but you can look it up, and you can ask the other men in your life about this. Again, this is something to be celebrated. How cool you're becoming a man. And also, like I said, a road trip to a drugstore for choosing personal hygiene supplies. In addition to teaching about the changes in one's body during puberty, this is a good opportunity. And remember that rule of 5 years before things might happen. At any age, it's important to talk about good touch versus bad touch, personal boundaries, how to say no and how to respect when somebody else says no, and privacy. So we're going to talk a little bit more about, about privacy. So you remember I said your values are important, and each family has their own set of values. There's rules that you probably have in your family, and some of the rules probably are about privacy, but this is an important time to be consistent about family rules. So if you want to respect privacy and to respect that you want your child to not be running through the house nude, so then this is a time that it's important to close your door when you're dressing or undressing, just like you'd want your child to have to respect his or her privacy, to close their door when when they're dressing. So you restrict nudity to the public areas of your house. What are the public areas of your house? Well, not the bedrooms and not the bathroom, probably. Use a robe. You know, you don't want to, you're not wanting to encourage your child to run around naked, as I said, so you want to also use a robe. Model knocking on their door and respect waiting to be given permission to enter a room. You know, how many times do we just open up our kids' rooms without even asking, or knocking on the door and then opening them up without being told okay, or having some indication that it's okay to come in. And again, for your for children who might have cognitive challenges or be nonverbal, or not have a form of expressing themselves, work out some kind of sign or some sign or strategy routine about privacy. Okay, let's talk a little bit about masturbation. Okay, that's not necessarily a comfortable topic. I see Dr. G is shaking her head no. But it is normal, it is healthy, it's common, and it feels good. And guess what? It's a way to discover your body and experience pleasure. And a majority of men and women do masturbate. Men report it more frequently than women, but most people do masturbate. And regardless of sexual orientation, including people who identify as asexual, most people masturbate. So you can teach as a parent, again, depending on your comfort level. And if you're not comfortable, find somebody who is comfortable talking about this, that masturbation is a good way for handling sexual fantasies. There are videos out there. There are instruction sheets for how to masturbate safely. And these are not, I'm not talking about exploitive stuff that might be on the internet or YouTube or whatever, things that were developed as part of sex education for non-autistic students and for autistic or students with special needs. Now, if one thing though is, so what you want to teach is that there's an appropriate time and place. What's the appropriate place is one's own bedroom when they're alone, when the door is closed. Not necessarily the bathroom, because like a public bathroom or a bathroom in school is not a private place. So a bedroom should always be considered a private place. Also that recognize that masturbation can become problematic. When is it problematic? Again, when it occurs in a public place, like school, when it is repetitive, when it's to the point of self-injury. So as I said, and this is where I'll tell a story about a relative who's very close to me, and I've known all of his life, let's put it this way. I had what was an embarrassing situation where the school social worker contacted me and said, hey, do you want me to teach this person about masturbation? Because he's discussing this and he's doing this in an unsafe way. And I said, I think I turned very bright red and I said, mumbled, no, I'll take care of it. But it's important to bring it out of the closet, really, because it's a normal and healthy process. Also want to point out about sexual orientation and identity. And, society historically teaches that there's two genders, male and female, but not everybody fits neatly into one category. And people can identify as one gender, both genders, neither genders. And again, respect that there are varied ways of being and loving. And there actually has been, I don't know if you guys have seen it, but there has been some research out lately that suggests that autistic adults, that there's a higher prevalence incidence of autistic adults identifying as being gay or bisexual, especially women autistic women. So again, people with autism can be heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, asexual, anything and everything. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the media and the internet. And you could use the internet and media for teachable moments. So like if you're watching some show together, you could say, no, and about relationships, or, there's relationships in most shows. Why do you think this happened? You could, if it's on tape, stop and say, what do you think he or she's going to do next? What would you do? Why do you think he or she said or did this thing? What do you think this person's feeling now? So whether it's things on YouTube, whether it's things, recordings or TV shows, these can be teachable moments. But you need to watch out, in internet, in terms of what people access on the internet, that you could put blocks and so forth, because sometimes there could be a lot of unwanted stuff on the internet. You could put in something in a search engine and you can get all sorts of unwanted stuff. So again, there's ways of blocking that. I also just want to point out that people with autism might have an increased risk of trauma, various forms of trauma, including being bullied. We talked before about the increased risk of being abused or neglected. And so this history of trauma can also impact how they feel about their body and their anxiety and their comfort level at having relationships. Just want to point out again, self-determination. There's a difference between having a choice and truly giving consent. And one of the reasons why, I think one of the factors about why people with autism might have increased risk of abuse or exploitation is a sense about blurred body boundaries. Many of our sons and daughters have multiple caregivers at school, in therapies, and a lot of times taught to comply with an adult's request. But you shouldn't comply with all requests. And how do you say no? And it's okay to say no. And when you say no, it should be honored as a part of advocacy, self-determination, and safety. So let's talk a little bit about problem sexual behavior. Okay, so one of the problems could be staring. I know that my son has had this issue, and so I don't know if you've ever heard of the 3x3 rule, but this means, okay, you could look for 3 seconds, you could look up to 3 times, but then it's staring. Touching others, what is the cause? Is when is it okay to be touched? When is it okay to touch somebody else? Teaching about boundaries, and coaching about certain situations. So this is a really good example about when you know that somebody's about to go into a situation. Maybe they're going somewhere with their friends or something, and you could coach them about what to watch out for, what to do. If this happens, what would you do? So another way of looking at what's considered a problem behavior is that there's this, Lisa Mitchell talked about behaviors can be categorized on a level of from 1 to 5. A 5 behavior is against the law. This is an example of a behavior that's physically hurtful, threatening, or illegal. So an example, hitting somebody, grabbing somebody, sometimes speaking to somebody in a sexual manner. When you do these behaviors that are level 5, you can get fired from your job. You could get arrested. These are behaviors that are never okay. Then a 4 behavior might be a behavior that's scary, that it could be, swearing against, staring, following somebody. This can cause you to, again, to be fired from a job. This behavior can also sometimes be against the law. A 3 behavior is a behavior that is odd. It can make some people feel uncomfortable. So like, for example, personal space. If you get too close to somebody, that could make somebody feel uncomfortable. Putting your face very too near to somebody, showing up to a place or party where you weren't invited. Again, this is odd. It's probably not going to get you arrested, but it could cause people to feel nervous, and it could cause people to not want to be around you. What's 2? Okay, a reasonable behavior. This is a type of behavior like if you're going to a party where you've been invited, talking to somebody you might know. These are okay behaviors. This is how people get to know each other. 1 is a very informal social behavior, like waving to somebody, smiling, or saying hi. This is totally okay. And again, this is the way that most people notice each other. So, when we talk in a little bit, we're going to talk about the circles of intimacy And like, who's in your innermost circle, who's in your outermost circle. The outermost circle might be people that it's okay to wave to. You know, the innermost circle might be people that are okay to hug, but these other people are not okay to hug. And these are, I think, concepts that I think can be taught to our kids no matter what their level of cognitive functioning or language. So let's talk a little bit about strategies. Oh, okay, so I was talking about circles of intimacy. So like in this example here, you're your most inner circle. This is, again, where it's okay to touch your own body. The next level of green might be people who are okay to hug. Who are the people in your life who are okay to hug? Who are the people who maybe you can give a far away hug, not very close, but just like, you know, kind of a hug. And who are the people maybe that it's okay just to shake hands or to wave to? Not everybody has this number of circles. Maybe you only have like 3 circles, but this is another way of making something concrete about how your child can interact with others and what's acceptable in terms of how others interact with your child. Another strategy for teaching sexual health is to use like social narratives. And again, while there's some that you can download from the internet, you could make your own and you could customize it to your own situation. Here's an example of one that was made using Boardmaker. And this one is teaching a boy about the changes that his body might go through during puberty. And you can put all sorts of graphics in there, shockingly enough or unshockingly enough, including changes to the boy's penis and about erections. And again, you want to say and normalize it, that these are all changes that you can expect, physical changes, feeling changes, and these changes are normal. You could use visual, you know, we've all used these kinds of things to teach any kind of behavior. You could use it for teaching hygiene. I've seen these ones where you could teach about handling, for girls handling their period, about what signs, you know, looking in your underwear, seeing if there's any red or brown in your underwear, going to get a pad, how to fasten the pad, how to clean up after yourself, this sort of thing. So again, these are things that are downloadable. So you could just, you know, Google some of these things and see what might be comfortable, or you can build your own. But using visuals is usually a very helpful way for teaching any type of strategy for our kids. Here's just a quick visual about how to say no, when to say no, go, and who and how to tell. One of the important things that to teach at even really a young age, you know, preschool, elementary age, is what's public and what's private. Because again, you're going to talk about that there's certain activities that are okay in private, but not in public. So, and there's certain behaviors that are okay, public and private behaviors, but do we agree on what's a private behavior? So for example, is picking your nose public or private? Well, one might say we'd hope it's private, but all too often it's public. But these are things that you could, again, show pictures and you could do like a card sort, what's public, what's private. With your body, what are public and private body parts? And then general rule of thumb is that what's covered by body parts and the other parts might be considered more public. I don't know if there's all women on this call, but so we might not be familiar about the rules of personal space and public urinals. I know I wasn't until somebody told me this. So for example, if you were at the bottom, you know, which stall would you choose if you were in a public men's bathroom for urinals? So chances are you want to choose, like in that top one, would you choose, if somebody was in 2 and 4, would you choose 1, 3, 5, or 6?
6.
There you go. Okay, because again, you want personal space. So these are ways, but these are simple rules to teach, in this case, our sons about personal space in a public restroom. Same thing for girls in a public restroom. Chances are you don't necessarily want to choose a stall that's right next to somebody else. I mentioned that there's lots of materials that could be used. There's these anatomically correct dolls. And I just want to point out, Children's Specialized doesn't necessarily necessarily endorse any product or not pro or con, but there's things that can be very helpful teaching strategies. Briefly, I want to talk to you about autism research study that we're involved in, and that is open to anybody with autism in the country, and that's called SPARK. And we're just taking a quick turn here to talk about SPARK. And this is for people with autism of any age, including adults with autism, kids with autism, and the families are encouraged to participate. It's all free. It could all be done from home. And one aspect of SPARK, when it's funded by the Simons Foundation, by the way, is to better understand the causes of autism. So when families enroll, if they're comfortable with this, they're asked to submit a saliva sample. The kit gets sent to the home. It's this much saliva in a tube, and it's analyzed. And if they can find that might explain if there's a genetic cause for autism, and that explains if there is a genetic cause in your family, then that could be helpful to know. Most families will not come up with genetic finding, but each year the saliva is checked more about autism, and as more families participate, they might identify additional genes that cause autism. So we joined autism. As I said, I have a son with, we joined SPARK. I have a son with autism, and I find it very helpful to be part of this study. Families, when they participate, if they submit the saliva sample, they can get a gift card up to $50. Again, you don't have to participate in that part. So to date, more than 54,000 people have participated in SPARK, and it's the largest autism study in the country. What's in it for you? Again, it helps to keep up with new discoveries. When there is a genetic explanation, you can be offered genetic counseling. You could meet other families who have the same genetic background. Sometimes there's things to look out for, that there might be other medical issues that might be associated with that genetic finding. Can complete, about what strategies, what services have you gotten, what's been helpful, what's not been helpful. When you complete some surveys, again, you can get the results back. You can get some other gift cards at times. And ultimately, what's important, we're not there yet, but ultimately it's important to know who best responds to what. Because, as a parent, you can't look into everything. You don't have the time and money to look into everything, and not everything is a good match for your particular family. But hopefully, ultimately, we want to learn more. And when you're part of a large study like this, that's committed for the long term, SPARK is in its 5th year. They're committed to go on for multiple decades. So when you do join, it's a way of finding out over time, what can you expect? What do we know about adults with autism? There's not enough research about adults, but again, the study, because it's long-term, will help to learn more. And also when you join SPARK, you're invited to participate in other research studies that could be of interest to you. So there's been studies about sleep, about challenging behaviors, response to COVID, again, what helps, what doesn't help. There's practical webinars. In fact, there were 2 webinars that you can find on the SPARK site about this one called Who's Afraid of Sex Education. So even on this topic, that there are some helpful things too. So if you have any interest in this, this is a website. You could just go to sparkforautism.org/CSH. Will take you to our SPARK site. We're one of 31 sites throughout the country that participate in SPARK. And here's the phone number and the website. Again, it could all be done from home. It's super easy. And I think it's a valuable study to be part of something big to better understand what's going on with autism. Okay, so let's talk a little briefly about some of the resources that I referred to for teaching about sexual health with your kids. I mentioned that you can buy these anatomically correct dolls. Barbie, I don't know how Barbie and Ken managed to never really get much in the way of body parts, other than Barbie has some pretty interesting breasts. Anyway, but you can order these things. And Autism Speaks also has a free downloadable toolkit about puberty and adolescence. Marsh Media is a site that has multiple helpful information related to puberty and hygiene. Answer Sex Ed is a program out of Rutgers. Rutgers is really cutting edge in terms of providing a lot of resources about sex ed, including resources that are adapted for people with various special needs. Vanderbilt has a free downloadable toolkit that's wonderful. We use this a lot. There's one for boys, there's one for girls. It's also in Spanish. So if you, this is the website for them, but you could also Google Healthy Bodies Toolkit. They have some wonderful things. Flash has some lesson plans for special ed. So you're not in this alone. Here's more. There's a whole journal devoted to sexuality and disability. And because this is recorded, you'll be able to access these resources after this webinar. So my take-home message, all of you guys, is don't give up. These might be, initially, it might be an uncomfortable conversation to have because you're not used to it, or maybe we have our own different hangups. But with these tools and other tools that you already have in your toolkit for having difficult conversations, it's important to address sexual education, sexual health for our kids throughout their lifetime. Not only is it important, but it will help you to feel empowered, and it'll help, I think it'll help your child to grow up in a more safe environment and feeling proud and happy about their developing body. So I want to thank you very much. This is how you can contact me at jharris@children's-specialized.org. And I encourage you to visit Children's Specialized Hospital website for more information about multiple topics related to autism and various special needs and health. Okay. So do we have any questions?
Wow, Jill, this was amazing. Completely unbelievable. I'll open it up for people who are in the room that will have questions. We were able to get it live on Facebook, and it's also showing on YouTube. So we actually have someone who messaged us asking if this information could be shared at her child's school. Actually, I think that was the message, right?
Sure.
Yes, she wanted to share it at her child's school. She said that her child's school doesn't have a sex education program for her son's class or her school. So she wanted to be able to share this information with them so they could design some type of curriculum for her child and the rest of the students using your information.
That's wonderful. I would also encourage that a parent, if they feel comfortable with some of those resources that I listed, it goes into a whole lot more detail, and there's examples of curricula that that schools can use or tailor for their individual needs. So that'd be great.
Yes.
Jill, can you go back your slide to the slide that has your contact information for people who are watching? Maybe they wanted to take that in. If you go backwards one, I think it will have that in.
Yes. Let me see if I can figure out how to
go to previous.
Oh, there you go. Oh,
there you go.
Thank you.
Yeah, no. So this way, while we're talking, people know how to get a hold of you. I mean, it's a lot of good stuff. I mean, and I think for our community, a lot of us we're so inundated with the day-to-day, trying to get them to therapy, get them to this program, to that program, that this is an area that get completely missed. I know, I will use your terminology now. I have someone special in my life that I've known all their life. And they've reached that age where, we've never talked to him about these things that you're describing, even the circles as you described it. I have to go look it up now to help him know who is he safe to hug and not hug, right? Because that was not something that I think to do, because it's just like, it's not on the forefront. I think there's a lot of assumptions we make as people, that people should automatically know these things. And you just highlighted, so for me, listening in, how important to break it down at a very basic level. So there are elements of it that I know I'm going to have to go back to and just use as a tool.
And I thank you, Dr. G. I also think that for those of us who have kids in with IEPs, I mean, this is something that could be built into the IEP to have some goals and objectives about sexual education. And also there should be goals and objectives related to safety. I think really sexual education is one aspect of safety. It's certainly not the only aspect of safety, but this is something that I think that schools should be addressing. And as we just mentioned a few minutes before, there are a lot of resources out there. So whether this is something that's part of their health education or embedded into some other part of the curriculum, it doesn't really matter, just so long as it is addressed and individualized in a way that's accessible, just like anything else. You could have resources, but if the resources are not accessible, meaning that they're not understandable, they're not practical, they're not functional, maybe they're not visual, they're not concrete, then these are all things that need to be tailored and specified, I think, in the IEP. And even for those people who have graduated not in an IEP, I mean, this is something, again, I think that this is responsibility of families, but not just the families, if they're in a different program, to also talk to the people in those programs about how it is or how it can be incorporated.
Yeah, I think the only conversation we had about my son's school was the concept of, okay, masturbation. But you've talked about so much more here than that. So as soon as they said it, I'm like, oh no, I don't want to talk about that, right? But the point here is that there's more to it about the safety component, about understanding space, understanding what I like the degrees of what the A5 is against the law. A5 is against the law, right? That even using that as an example of how to really help our children or our loved ones understand that there's certain things that they can and cannot do, which will result in them getting in trouble. Right. It should be built in the IEP. I mean, absolutely brilliant idea, because that's where we expect it to be individualized. But the focus, I know as parent, is really at the younger time, when they're younger, and obviously when they're in middle school, how to get them on the academic side, and not really realizing that this is also a huge component of their growth and development. So I think what you've shared here is really going to hopefully inspire many of us to really take a closer look at our IEP, closer look at how we engage with our kids and share in that space. I'll open it up for other people if you guys have any questions or comments for Dr. Harris.
I have go ahead, sorry. I'll go after.
No, just saying, somebody in the chat asked about the presentation, and I sent it to Dr. G. I don't know if you could send it to the membership.
Yep, I'll be happy to post it to those of you who have signed up. We'll send a what is it called, an eval. So once you complete the eval, you'll get the PowerPoint. I'm just using that as an opportunity for people to give us feedback. But yes, we'll make it available for anybody that's interested. And like I said, this has been recorded as well too, so you should be able to see it live, and also on YouTube. You can go to our station and you see it there too. But we'll be happy to share the PowerPoint. Ashley, you had a question?
Yeah, something you said in the beginning, you spoke about how children with developmental disabilities, and you mentioned even like girls having 65 to 80% of them have reported that they were sexually abused. I mean, that's shocking for me as a parent of a child who has autism, but also a child with autism who can't speak. And so she can't report. And so I guess for parents on the more severe side of the spectrum, do you have any advice for parents that would keep our kids safer, like scenarios that these types of behaviors happen most likely in, and what we can do as parents, whether a child has a voice or doesn't, to protect them the best way we can?
That's a great question. And I think to your point is that not everybody's able to express themselves using language or an augmented device. So chances are it's underreported. It tends to be under prosecuted. So, you know, it's a big issue. I think that the concept about where it's more likely to happen, frankly, is with somebody that they know. Whether, and I think that there are studies, I want to say that like, you know, with, again, a bus driver, an aide, a family member. And this is, by the way, as far as like family member, this is true for our non-autistic kids as well, as opposed to it being a stranger. And this is why I think it is really important to talk again about like those circles of intimacy, who it's okay to say no. I mean, when you think again about some of the interventions and teaching strategies that our kids, I don't want to say exposed to, but that the orientation is about, again, compliance. And you got to teach that it's not always, not everything, and not for everybody should it be to comply, that your body is your body, that your body is personal, and that you can say no. And you know, what do we do? I mean, a lot of times, you know, hug your therapist. I love my OT, I love my PT. Let me give you a hug. You know what? Beyond a certain age, maybe beyond preschool, no, you don't have to give a hug. You can give a high five. Even these kinds of things, it might be subtle ways, but I think that it's important ways to show that, you know, that there are body boundaries and there are relationships. You might really love your OT or your PT or your speech therapist, but it doesn't mean that you have to hug them, you know, and it doesn't mean that you want to encourage them to hug you. So I think that we need to just examine ourselves. Same thing, you know, like, oh, there's your aunt. You know, maybe the aunt and grandmother and grandfather and uncles are in that circle of that are okay to hug. But I think that, again, to the extent that somebody has autonomy is really important at any age and at any cognitive level.
Oh, that's awesome.
Thank you.
I think, Lilia, you were asking a question about, your comment about her daughter has Down syndrome and she loves hugs. Yeah, and those things become very challenging, I imagine. And so, Dr. Harris, how do you address or redirect that person who gets their emotional high from loving or hugging someone?
Well, again, not to say to not hug anybody, but again, who would you say is in the circle of intimacy that's okay to give a hug? Chances, you know, your immediate family, maybe your extended family or a best friend. But beyond that, you could also show the pleasure that you can get by a very enthusiastic hello, a very enthusiastic high five, writing or drawing a picture or something to show how much you really care about that person. So I'm not saying that nobody should enjoy the pleasure of touch, because that's part of the thing too, is that hopefully the person will go on to have a relationship where it's, you know, where they will be sexually active, maybe have kids, be a parent, what have you. But that that I think you could still talk about ways of getting your hugs in your closer circle of intimacy and ways to show affection and receive affection in different ways.
Yeah, awesome.
Or you could talk about that what's the difference between hugs and being touched in, you know, again, personal, private versus public parts of your body.
Absolutely. Wow, what an amazing conversation today and a great presentation. And for those who are watching, listening, will listen later, Dr. Harris is at the Children's Specialized Hospital. They have several branches all around. And, you know, for those who are newly getting diagnosed and needs, and that's a topic that Dr. Harris, I'll talk to you offline about. I have a lot of new people who are asking the questions of diagnosis and whether ADOS and whether that's necessary. So these are some conversations that we want to be able to help the younger folks learn about. So we will have a different topic on a different day about that. But you can certainly reach out to her. She talked about the Spark research. I think is really crucial that we have a greater understanding about, especially when she talks about in the adult world. There's so many of our kids that are becoming older, and we need to know more about how to best provide care, healthcare for them. So being a part of this research work will be very instrumental in helping to get answers. So you can reach her. Her number is displayed here. And if you have any other questions for her, please feel free to reach out. We want to thank all of you who were able to join us. I hope this has been informative. Like our vision with my goal is really to continue to ask the experts, those who have walked the journey. And I love the experts who actually have personal life stories, because then it's not theory. She was not only able to share, anecdotally her parts with being respectful of her family's story. Because as parents, sometimes we want to tell the story as if it's ours, but it's really not ours. It's that individual's life, right? So that's another conversation for another day. How do you begin to give them that, allow them to be self-determinant in what they want to share and what they don't want to share. And so I'm learning to be respectful of my children's life and their journey. So actually, we're still learning, where we just want to tell everybody what's happening, but sometimes they just don't want that. So Dr. Harris, thank you so much for making time this afternoon to be a part of this conversation with us. I know we've learned a lot, and I know, Ashley, you had any comment about that?
No, I think, you know what? I think all my questions were answered. I feel like this was really good. This was a really good conversation that was necessary.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was almost begging people. I'm like, your child may be a teenager and this is when you should join, but you just blew that theory right out of the door, because it should be at least 5 years before puberty to start to have this conversation. So I know those who watch later will be able to take something out of it and really walk with
Yeah, I mean, I thought that Antoinette being only almost 6, we were way before puberty. But then when I saw that girls can start at 8.5, I was really surprised by that. I didn't know that it can happen that early. So I feel like, wow, maybe I wasn't early. This is like the right time to really learn about this.
Yeah, and it's never too late. Again, the part about the hugs, just keep in mind, hugs still great for everybody. But then you could also talk about, here's an okay kind of hug versus, again, where to touch or not touch. But I really thank you again so much for inviting me to speak with your group. I really enjoyed it, and I hope to come back sometime. But don't hesitate to reach out to me, even though I stopped sharing my screen with us.
That's fine. I think we saw that. So thank you everyone for joining. We will see you next month. Next month, where I have a dietitian and nutritionist who's going to be with us to talk to us about dietary interventions and shopping for food and reading labels and all that good stuff, just in time for Thanksgiving. And of course, if you're watching us and you have a loved one with special needs, we have a gala coming up on November 6th. We have people who are donating tickets. So if you're interested in attending, and all COVID protocol will be observed. So for those who are able to join us, please do. We can't emphasize enough the importance of getting vaccinated, so then this way you don't have that fear of walking around. So I just want to encourage my families out there. This is life or death issue with this particular pandemic, and we want all our children safe. So if you're wanting to come out November 6th, send us an email at info@mygoal.org, mygoalinc.org, info@mygoalinc.org, and we'll be happy to include you on the list. And as people donate tickets, you are able to attend for our families. And if you're watching and you want to support families, please do so. We do it just to give them a night out. We want families to be able to have an opportunity to dance for just a few hours, like life is normal, like all of us have always had. That's always our mission. And my goal is to restore hope to families on the autism journey. And we do it one day at a time, sharing connections and sharing hope, which is what we've done here today. So on that note, thank you everyone, and have a fantastic evening. God bless. Bye-bye.